Hello friends, Mel Jeffcoat here, and we're going to talk about Lull some more today. Ramon Lull, the medieval philosopher who basically accidentally invented modern science and mathematics. Well, at least he set the stage for it to be invented many centuries later. But today we're going to continue looking at the first triangle of figure T from Ramon Lull, and these information that I am giving you largely comes from two particular manuscripts that Ramon Lull wrote. He wrote a manuscript called the Ars Generalis Ultima, which is the long version that explains how his art works. And then he wrote another book that was like a Cliff's Notes version of it, which is called the Ars Brevis, the shorter art. So I use both of those. Usually I start with the Ars Brevis because that is shorter and easier to get into. It's only about 100 pages printed out from a PDF rather than almost 400. But sometimes that's not detailed enough, and then I go over to the AGU, as it's usually abbreviated, to see what that one has to say. So anyhow, let's get into figure T some more. Okay, here we are with the version of figure T that just shows the first triangle. Real quick, here is the full figure T, which is of course a lot more complicated, and here is the simplified version that only shows the triangle BCD. What we're going to talk about today is these words around the outside, and it's the same set of words for each of the letters. That's not true with all of the triangles, but it is with this one. These are telling you different ways that you can use this triangle to compare. Lull called these words around the outside the different species of comparison. So the first one is sensual and sensual, and we'll get into what this means in a moment because it's a specialized meaning, a little bit different than how it's used nowadays. But if you compare sensual and sensual, then you have one possibility, one category of comparison. At the top, you have intellectual and intellectual. And again, that has a specialized meaning that we'll get to. And in between, you have a comparison between sensual and intellectual. Now, what do these words mean in the Middle Ages? Sensual means something that can be experienced with your senses. It's the primary experience that we have. If you touch something and you feel that it is smooth or rough or hard or soft or spiky or whatever, and you can smell it and you can see it and hear it, those are all senses, and those sense impressions that we get are what this level is talking about when it's talking about comparing sensual things. The other option is intellectual, which basically means abstractions. If you want to go to a near contemporary of Ramon Lull, Thomas Aquinas, who died right about the time that Lull was getting started with his career. Thomas Aquinas differentiated two kinds of abstractions. He had what he called first intentions, which are abstractions of physical experience. And then he had second intentions, which are abstractions of abstractions. So let's have an example. Your specific physical house that you live in, that is sensual because you can walk up, you can touch it, you can smell it, you can see it, you can hear the noises that it makes. You experience your house, it's a physical object. The memory that you have of your house when you're not there, that would be an abstraction, and it's a first intention abstraction, according to Thomas Aquinas's categorization, because it is an abstraction that is directly based off of this physical object. Now, to take it up another level to a second intention level of abstraction, an abstraction of an abstraction, you could look at the idea of home. Well, everybody has a different idea of what home is, and it might be based off of a memory that they have of a good place that they lived. It might be based off of something that they've read, or a movie that they watched, or who knows. So the idea of home is an abstraction of an abstraction, a second level intention. So when you're using this triangle, you can compare two things that are physical objects that you can sense, and that is the level sensual and sensual. You can compare a physical object to an abstraction, or you can compare two abstractions. And the comparisons that you are making for any of these two things are the vertices of the triangle: difference, concordance, and contrariety, which I talked about yesterday. So let's take a look at an example of this. We're just going to stick with the sensual versus sensual level for today. So you're talking about comparing two physical objects, living or not living, doesn't matter. You can compare them either way. So let's take an example of a stone and an animal. How can we compare those? Well, how are they different? There's a lot of ways in which they're different, but one way that they're different is an animal can move of its own accord and a stone cannot. But how are they similar? They both contain minerals. That is one way in which they are similar. How are they contrary? One way in which they're contrary is that an animal is alive and a stone is not alive. You can't be both alive and not alive at the same time. They are mutually exclusive, and that's what makes it contrary in this case. So when you're working purely at the physical level, these questions of difference and concordance and contrariety, even though modern science does not use these words specifically, that's basically what is going on. Anytime you're discovering something new, you have to figure out how it fits into what you already know. And that's concordance. And you have to figure out, what does it change? How is it different from what you already know? And of course, that's difference. And then contrariety comes in when you've discovered something new and it makes something that you thought you knew no longer valid. It invalidates something that you thought you knew. And that would be contrariety. All of the exploration and experimentation that happens in science falls under this rubric, although of course it doesn't use these words. You can see how modern science, over a long and winding path, came out of part of this triangle. So there's just one more thing that I want to talk about in regards to this tonight, and that is how contrariety can turn into difference depending on what level of abstraction you're looking at something. Because what I've noticed, the pattern that I have noticed while working with these, is that contrarieties at one level of abstraction, when you go up a level, they turn into just differences. So, for example, when you are trying to classify, say, animals, you come up with various characteristics that you use to divide them. So, does it have a spine or doesn't it? Okay, that actually isn't used anymore as a dividing line in classification of animals, but it was for a long time. So you can't both have a spine and not have one. That is contrary at that level, at the level of an individual animal. When you move up a level and you look at all animals, it's just a difference, because the existence of animals with spines doesn't preclude the existence of animals that don't have spines. They can both exist, they can coexist. It's only contrary at the level of the individual. At the population level, it's just difference. And I think that is a large part of how Lull got to the idea that at the highest level, when we were talking about figure A and how it has no contrariety, it's because it's the highest level. If it had contrariety, then there would have to be a higher level beyond it in which those oppositions became just differences. So there is difference at the level of figure A. The differences between the different dignities of God, the different attributes, but there's no contrariety. So this is a lot to take in, I'm sure, but if you spend some time thinking about it, I think you'll get it. And if there's anything that's confusing, feel free to ask, and I will do my best to answer. So thank you for watching, and until next time, keep exploring.